This is not about pleasure itself. It's about control. A man wakes up every day with a choice. Not a loud one. Not dramatic. A quiet choice. The kind no one sees. The kind that slowly shapes his life. He reaches for comfort first. His phone. His cravings. His urges. His distractions. And nothing terrible happens that day. That's the danger. Because weakness rarely announces itself. It whispers. It disguises itself as relief. A young man once said he just wanted to feel good every day. He avoided stress. Avoided discomfort. Avoided anything that challenged him. At first, life felt easy. Light. Even enjoyable. But slowly, something changed. His focus weakened. His discipline faded. His confidence shrank. Not in one big moment, but in 1,000 small surrenders. This is how quiet weakness grows. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that true strength is not about what you do when things are hard, but what you allow yourself to become when things are easy. Daily pleasure is not evil. But unearned pleasure, constant pleasure, becomes a silent master. It trains your mind to avoid effort. It teaches your brain that reward comes without struggle. And over time, you stop chasing growth. You start chasing comfort. There was a man who promised himself he would train every morning. The first day, he woke up tired. He said, "Just today I'll rest." The next day, the same voice returned. "Just today." Weeks passed. His body softened. His discipline disappeared. And yet, every day felt fine. That's the illusion. Weakness doesn't feel like failure. It feels like comfort. Another man lived differently. He also felt tired. Also felt urges. Also felt the pull of easy pleasure. But he made a rule. He would not negotiate with weakness. Not because he was stronger, but because he understood something important. Every small decision is a vote for the man you become. So he got up. Not perfectly. Not always motivated. But consistently. And slowly, his mind hardened. His focus sharpened. His confidence grew. Not from pleasure, but from restraint. There is a difference between enjoying life and escaping it. Daily pleasure becomes dangerous when it replaces purpose. When it becomes your default state. When silence feels uncomfortable, and you constantly need stimulation. That's when pleasure stops being a reward and becomes a crutch. A wise man once sat alone for hours every day. No phone. No noise. No distraction. At first, his mind resisted. It craved stimulation. But over time, something shifted. He became calm. Clear. In control. Because he trained himself to exist without needing constant pleasure. That is power. Most people never notice when they lose control. They just feel less focused. Less driven. Less alive. They blame the world. But the truth is quieter. They surrender too often to what feels good now, instead of what builds strength later. Discipline is not punishment. It is protection. It protects your time. Your energy. Your future. And it does something else. It gives you a deeper kind of pleasure. Not the fast, shallow kind, but the kind that comes from knowing you are in control of yourself. There is nothing wrong with pleasure. But if you cannot go without it, it owns you. If you need it every day, it weakens you. If you depend on it, it shapes you. A man who masters himself does not fear silence. He does not run from discomfort. He does not chase pleasure to feel alive. He builds a life that makes pleasure unnecessary. And when he chooses it, it becomes a reward, not a requirement. Look closely at your daily habits. Not the big ones. The small ones. The invisible ones. The moments when no one is watching. That is where your future is being decided. Quiet weakness is not loud. It does not destroy you overnight. It slowly pulls you away from your potential. One comfortable decision at a time. So ask yourself, are you choosing pleasure? Or are you choosing control? The difference between a disciplined man and a distracted one is not intelligence. It is tolerance. Tolerance for boredom. Tolerance for discomfort. Tolerance for the absence of pleasure. Most people break not because life is hard, but because they are not used to being uncomfortable. Epictetus taught that no man is free who is not master of himself. And self-mastery is tested in silence. Not when you're busy. Not when you're distracted. But when you are alone, with a choice. Do you reach for something easy? Or do you sit with the discomfort and grow stronger? There was a man who could not sit still. Every quiet moment made him uneasy. He always needed something: music, videos, conversations, stimulation. At first, it seemed normal. But over time, he noticed something strange. He couldn't think deeply anymore. His attention fractured. His patience disappeared. He became a slave, not to pain, but to pleasure. Now imagine another man. He also lived in the same world. Same distractions. Same temptations. But he practiced something different. He deliberately chose moments of emptiness. He would sit and do nothing. No noise. No escape. At first, it felt unbearable. His mind raced. His body resisted. But slowly, he gained control. He was no longer reacting to every urge. He was deciding. That is the difference. Weakness reacts. Strength chooses. Every urge you feel is not a command. It is a suggestion. But most people never question it. They feel it, and they obey. Hungry? Eat. Bored? Scroll. Tired? Quit. Urge? Indulge. And over time, they lose something invisible: authority over themselves. A man once tried to quit his daily habits of comfort. Not all at once. Just one thing. One small act of resistance each day. The first day, it felt impossible. The urge was loud. Persistent. Almost painful. But he didn't give in. The next day, it came back. Slightly weaker. By the seventh day, something changed. He realized the urge had no real power. It only had the power he gave it. This is the truth most people avoid. You are not controlled by your desires. You are controlled by your obedience to them. There is a hidden cost to daily pleasure. It steals your edge. Your hunger. Your drive to improve. Because when you constantly feel satisfied, you stop seeking growth. A lion that is always fed loses the instinct to hunt. A man who is always comfortable loses the instinct to strive. Think about the moments you feel most alive. It is rarely when things are easy. It is when you overcome something. When you push through resistance. When you choose discipline over comfort. That is where real satisfaction lies. There was an old craftsman who worked every day with precision. He didn't rush. He didn't seek shortcuts. He embraced the slow, difficult process. Someone asked him, "Why don't you make it easier for yourself?" He smiled and said, "Because easy work creates a weak man." That is the paradox. The more you chase ease, the harder life becomes. The more you embrace difficulty, the stronger you become. You don't need to remove pleasure from your life. You need to put it in its place. After effort. After discipline. After growth. That is when it becomes meaningful. A man who earns his rest sleeps differently. A man who earns his pleasure enjoys it differently. Because it is no longer an escape. It is a reward. Most people never reach their potential not because they lack talent, but because they lack restraint. They cannot say no to themselves. And if you cannot deny yourself small things, you will never achieve big things. Discipline is built in moments that feel insignificant. When you wake up and don't want to get out of bed. When you feel the urge to waste time. When you want to quit halfway. Those are the moments that matter. Not because they are big, but because they repeat. A weak decision repeated daily becomes a weak life. A strong decision repeated daily becomes a powerful one. There was a man who wrote down every time he gave into comfort. Not to judge himself, but to see clearly. At the end of the week, he looked at the list. It was long. Longer than he expected. That's when he understood. Weakness was not occasional. It was habitual. Awareness is the first step. Control is the second. Consistency is the final. You don't need motivation. Motivation fades. You need standards. Rules you don't break, even when you don't feel like it. The strongest men are not those who never feel temptation. They are those who feel it, and choose differently. Again and again. So the next time you feel the pull of easy pleasure, pause. Just for a moment. Ask yourself, who am I becoming if I say yes to this? And more importantly, who do I become if I say no? Because your life is not built on big decisions. It is built on small, repeated ones. And each one is shaping you. Quietly. Daily. There is a moment most men ignore. It's small. Almost invisible. The moment between impulse and action. That is where your power lives. Seneca once warned that a man who is ruled by pleasure is already defeated. Not by the world, but by himself. Because when your mind cannot hold a command, your life cannot hold direction. A man sat late at night, staring at his screen. He told himself it was just for a few minutes. Just a little escape. But minutes became hours. Hours became a habit. And the habit became his default. The next morning, he felt it. Heavy. Unfocused. Disconnected from his goals. Not because something dramatic happened, but because he slowly lost control over small decisions. Now consider another man in the same moment. Same night. Same temptation. He pauses. Not long. Just enough to notice the urge. He doesn't fight it aggressively. He simply doesn't obey it. He puts the phone down. Sits in the discomfort. And goes to sleep. The next morning feels different. Clear. Sharp. In control. That is the cost of one decision. And most people never measure it. Weakness is not always giving in immediately. Sometimes it is delaying discipline. Saying, I'll start tomorrow. But tomorrow is the safest lie. Because it never demands action today. There was a student who always planned his life perfectly. He had goals. Schedules. Big ideas. But every time it was time to act, he hesitated. He waited for the right mood. The right energy. The right moment. Years passed. Nothing changed. Because he was addicted, not to pleasure, but to postponing effort. This is another form of quiet weakness. Not loud failure, but silent delay. A disciplined man does not wait to feel ready. He acts, and becomes ready through action. Musonius Rufus taught that we train not to speak about virtue, but to live it. And living it means doing what is necessary, even when it feels unnecessary. There was a runner who trained every morning before sunrise. People asked him why. No one is watching, they said. He replied, that's exactly why it matters. Because discipline built in private shows up in public. When you choose effort in silence, you build a version of yourself that does not depend on applause. You become stable, grounded, unshaken by distractions. Pleasure, when overused, makes you fragile. You begin to depend on conditions. You need things to feel right before you act. You need comfort before effort. You need motivation before discipline. And when those things are missing, you stop. But a strong man reverses this. He acts first. He creates momentum. He builds energy through movement. Not the other way around. There is a reason discomfort feels heavy. It is unfamiliar. Your mind is not used to it. But the more you face it, the lighter it becomes. Think of a blacksmith shaping steel. The fire is intense. The pressure is constant. But without it, the steel remains weak, unformed, useless. You are no different. Without resistance, you don't grow. Without friction, you don't sharpen. There was a man who avoided all hardship. He chose the easiest path every time. At first, life felt smooth. But when real challenges came, he broke. Because he had never prepared himself. Another man chose difficulty often. Not extreme suffering, but controlled discomfort. Waking early, training when tired, working when distracted, saying no when it was easier to say yes. And when life tested him, he stood firm. Because he had practiced. This is what most people misunderstand. Discipline is not about control in perfect conditions. It is about stability in imperfect ones. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. And your habits are built in moments no one sees. Ask yourself, what do you do when you are bored? What do you do when you are alone? What do you do when you feel an urge? Those answers define you. There is no audience in those moments. No reward. No recognition. Only you and your standard. A man with no standard negotiates with himself constantly. Just this once. Just a little. It doesn't matter. But it always matters. Because every exception weakens the rule. A man with a standard doesn't argue. He decides once, and follows through. Not perfectly, but consistently. You don't need to be extreme. You need to be intentional. Enjoy your life. But don't let enjoyment control it. Rest. But don't let comfort define you. Experience pleasure. But never depend on it. Because the strongest position a man can be in is not needing anything to feel in control. And that kind of strength is built quietly, daily, in moments that seem small, but are shaping everything. There is something deeper beneath discipline that most people never reach. It is not control. It is identity. At first, you force yourself to act differently. You resist urges. You delay comfort. You make harder choices. It feels unnatural, even uncomfortable. But slowly, something changes. You stop trying to be disciplined. You start becoming someone who simply does not act on impulse. Not because you are forcing it, but because it no longer matches who you are. A man once struggled with this shift. Every day he fought himself. Workout or rest. Work or distract. Focus or escape. It felt like war in his mind. But he kept repeating one simple rule. I do what I said I would do. Even when he didn't feel like it. Even when no one cared. Even when it felt meaningless. Months passed. The struggle didn't disappear overnight. But it softened. Because repetition does something powerful. It removes negotiation. One day, he noticed something strange. He didn't debate anymore. He just acted. Not emotionally. Not impulsively. Just naturally. That is the turning point most people miss. Discipline stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like default behavior. Marcus Aurelius understood this in a different form. He wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. What you repeat becomes what you are. Not what you believe. Not what you intend. But what you repeatedly do. A man who repeatedly chooses pleasure over purpose becomes a man of comfort. A man who repeatedly chooses effort over ease becomes a man of strength. There is no middle ground that lasts forever. Only direction. There was a worker who used to take breaks every time he felt tired. At first, it seemed harmless. Normal even. But over time, something subtle happened. His tolerance for effort decreased. Small tasks felt heavy. Simple work felt draining. He didn't notice the shift until he could no longer ignore it. Then he changed one thing. He delayed his comfort. Not removed it. Just delayed it. He would finish what he started before allowing rest. At first, it felt strict. But over time, his energy returned. His focus sharpened. His endurance increased. Because he retrained his response to discomfort. This is how strength is rebuilt. Not by adding more pleasure, but by reclaiming control over response. Weakness often hides in justification. It's been a long day. I deserve this. I'll start later. These statements feel reasonable. But they quietly weaken the structure of discipline. Because every justification creates permission. And permission repeated becomes habit. A disciplined man does not eliminate comfort. He places it correctly. After effort. After responsibility. After commitment. There was a soldier who trained under harsh conditions. Cold mornings. Exhausting drills. Repetition without reward. Someone asked him why he endured it. He answered simply, "So I don't break when it matters." Life works the same way. You are being trained either by discipline or by comfort. One prepares you for pressure. The other avoids it. And pressure always arrives eventually. In work. In health. In relationships. In responsibility. When it does, there are only two types of men. Those who have trained for it. And those who have avoided it. Avoidance feels safe in the moment. But it creates fragility over time. Because what you avoid, you never strengthen. A man who avoids discomfort becomes controlled by it. A man who faces it becomes indifferent to it. That is the difference between reaction and mastery. Epictetus taught that freedom is not the absence of difficulty. It is the ability to choose your response within it. And that ability is built, not given. Look at your daily life closely. Not the big decisions. The small reflexes. The automatic behaviors. That is where your true condition is revealed. Do you reach for distraction before thought? Do you seek comfort before effort? Do you escape before engaging? Or do you pause and choose intentionally? The answer is not about perfection. It is about direction. Because every repeated choice is shaping your inner structure. Quietly. Continuously. Without pause. And one day, you realize something simple. You are not the same person you were months ago. Not because of one event. But because of hundreds of small decisions. Some built you. Some weakened you. And all of them mattered. So the real question is no longer about pleasure. It is about pattern. What pattern are you building with your daily choices? Because pleasure will always be available. But discipline is not automatic. It must be chosen. Again. And again. And again. Until choosing it becomes easier than avoiding it. Until restraint feels more natural than indulgence. Until effort feels more familiar than escape. That is when quiet weakness ends. Not through struggle. But through identity change. And what remains is a man who is not constantly fighting himself. Because he no longer needs to. If you want more content like this, subscribe to Inner Steel.